Very excited to do this. This is one of our first attempts at a panel like this, so we're very excited to pilot this and, of course, have you on board with us. So I won't bore you with too many details before we get into the research, but just a very quick overview into HID. Tom, if you want to go into that section, please. Our mission at HID is to power the trusted identities of the world's people, places, and things. And while I know that may sound very fluffy, there's actually a lot of meat to that, because what we really hope to do as an industry leader is ensure that all of the identities that are used by the millions of people leveraging HID's products as they travel to the hundreds of countries of which we have business in, and of course the things that we track, all have that level of security and trusted relegated authority to really make sure that things are done seamlessly and it enhances the quality of people's lives. That's why we're in business. And then moving on to the next piece for us, as I mentioned, we've got millions and millions of people in more than 100 countries using our products and services, both to access physical and digital places. So whether you're in an airport, or whether you are logging into your network station, or you're seeing us in a retail shop, we definitely have that global presence, and we take that responsibility very seriously. Now, let's go on to the next slide, which is going to be our broad portfolio. So you probably really understood and known HID for 30 years now for our physical access control line. So cards, readers, controllers, and moving into mobile IDs. But we're also very proud to say that we are much more than that, and we continue to expand our portfolio to ensure that we do have the solutions needed for larger ecosystems and to help plug into the needs of both our partners and our end users. So whether it's printers and personalization solutions from our secure issuance line, extended access technologies like biometrics and biometric software and embedded modules, identity and access management solutions, our software and network access division, including visitor management, citizen identity solutions, so passports, e-passports, driver's licenses, government documents, and of course also our RFID line around identification technologies, and delving more into ticketing, event ticketing, and real-time location services. So we're much more than card and readers, although we do know that that is a core piece of our business and are excited to continue expanding that. Now, if we move on, we also have customers across all types of verticals, whether it's government to entertainment to infrastructure, commercial real estate, and of course, you know us very well in the enterprise or office space. And last but not least, like I said, we truly are honored and thankful and pleased to have such a global presence. We are headquartered in Austin, Texas, which is where I am based, although I'm currently in a satellite office in Chile, Eden Prairie, Minnesota, and the Minneapolis area. We are part of ASSA ABLOY. They are our parent company, and they're based in Stockholm. And we have a large delegation of team members and support staff in our Center of Excellence, which was recently opened in Galway for Europe, and multiple facilities throughout the UK, Ireland, and other parts of the European continent, of which we're very proud of that presence as well. So that said, enough of the stump speech. Let's get into the survey findings, which is why we are all here. So before we go into the actual findings, I'd like to give you kind of a run through of the methodology and how we got to the findings themselves. So taking a quick look, we had about 2,700 respondents. We commissioned this survey at the end of 2022 in fourth quarter, and we sent this across the globe. So the trends that you see and the responses that are driving those trends are truly global in nature. And we also have a lot of great findings that came from our European delegation. Now, our audience is pretty evenly split between both partners and end users, about 1,500 and 1,200 respectively. We found this to be really important because we wanted to make sure that we didn't over-index on one perspective over another. And so we're happy to say that not just within the sample size, the global presence, we also got a good split between those who are working in different facets of the business. Now, taking a closer look at that, let's also dive into company size. So a little more than half of our respondents were from smaller organizations with 1 to 1,000 employees or team members. And then we had a relatively even split between the remaining half, about 22%, representing medium-sized organizations, and then larger enterprise with 10,000 plus employees. So now that you know when the survey was commissioned, how it was commissioned, to whom, and to what type of company we're working with, let's go into the findings. In sum, we had 5 key trends and 5 key market drivers that are really shaping the industry in 2023 and what we firmly believe will be beyond 2023 as well. Now, first and foremost on the list is that supply chain issues, we do see those continue to be a factor moving into 2023. Now, as you've all heard across the landscape of all industries, all geographies, supply chain issues caused and driven by the pandemic really were a major thing that everyone had to work through, including the security industry. Now, according to our survey, 74% of respondents said that they were indeed impacted by supply chain issues in 2022, with half of them feeling optimistic if things will improve in 2023. Now, it's interesting. We say that we have a 50-50 split when our respondents were asked if supply chain issues will ease in 2023, and that was statistically a true 50-50 split, with 49.9 and 51.1% respectively, having either side of optimism on that topic. Now, interestingly enough, within the vertical segmentation, we saw that commercial real estate companies, or CRE firms, were most impacted, with 78% citing supply chain problems. And although organizations in the healthcare industry said that they were less effective, they are still concerned that those problems will continue into 2023. Now, focusing more on the optimistic side, we did a segment down into that 50-50 split, and we saw that more than 2/3 of organizations with fewer than 1,000 employees, so the smaller organizations, felt that they were, yes, highly impacted by supply chain, but they are the most optimistic that those issues will resolve in 2023. And more on this topic from our expert panelists here shortly. So moving to our next big theme, and that's going to be around the idea of sustainability. We saw, and we were pleased to see this, but honestly, we were a bit surprised to see how much of an influence that sustainability is increasing on the supplier side, but also on the purchasing side. So as you can see here, 87% of respondents to our survey say that sustainability ranks as either important to, quote, extremely important to their customers, and 76% say that they have seen the importance of sustainability increase to the customers themselves. Now, what I think what's really interesting here is whenever you do take a closer look into the vertical segmentation. So in financial services, 43% of companies said that sustainability has increased importance. 34% of healthcare companies, 32% of commercial real estate all said this was very important. It's also interesting to say, too, that both financial services, government agencies, and healthcare companies, all of them around 1/3 said that their customers are extremely concerned about sustainability on the partner side. So what this really means is that sustainability is no longer just lip service. It is really drilling down into becoming a more important driver in terms of purchases, and suppliers and manufacturers are being asked to prove that they are working towards ESGs and sustainability goals. And we see this as being of higher importance in Europe than in other places of the world. But more on that from our expert panel as well. Now, let's move into trend number 3, and that is no surprise to anybody. We are living in this environment, and that's the nature of this very virtual press conference, and that's going to be around hybrid work environments, pushing cloud-based access management further and further into the mainstream. So at the onset of the pandemic in March of 2020, those who were able to work from home did. And as they continue to do that throughout the duration of the pandemic, well, people tended to like it. And so now that we are in March of 2023, 3 years later, this idea of hybrid work is definitely here to stay. So in fact, over 80% of our survey respondents are offering a hybrid work model of in-office and or remote work. Now, we saw that some organizations are going fully remote. We saw that very few, about 19%, are staying fully in office, but the large majority of those are offering a flex model where you're in the office some days and not on others. You know that. So what does that really mean for us in the industry? Well, that means that you have to do more than just secure your physical spaces. You now have to secure everything from your networks to devices to anything that's plugged in to make sure that you are taking a more zero trust approach, where multi-factor authentication and passwordless authentication are, quote, the most important technologies to the future of work transition, with 67% responding with those as their top 2. Now, this trend is so important, we actually have 2 slides on this. And so let's take a quick look at the top 5 hybrid work enablers according to our survey. So in order of importance, as discussed, MFA or passwordless authentication, Next up, and we really saw this with smaller organizations, was this idea around just having a data strategy. They may not have needed this as much before, and some are really struggling to get help to put that into place. So this idea of just an overall data strategy, data privacy, is really important to a lot of organizations. Of course, and we'll touch more on this here briefly, around digital and or mobile IDs, really becoming a new work enabler. Of course, zero trust security approach, and of course, post-pandemic contactless and or touchless solutions to reduce those points of contact. Now, if we take a look at identification as a service, which is of course very closely plugged into cloud-based access management, you see splits in terms of how various verticals are planning to utilize this technology in the near future. Now, you've probably seen this from the EU. We also see this quite a bit in the States, with government agencies being essentially required to implement MFA in a path to zero trust. But you also see that in other organizations and other verticals where, of course, data privacy is very important and the stakes are high, like financial services, healthcare, and commercial real estate. But again, more on that from the panel as well here shortly. Let's go on to number 4. That's going to be digital ID adoption rather, accelerating more rapidly than ever. Now, this closely plays into cloud-based access management, which is driven by a hybrid work model, but you're also seeing a big push towards mobile IDs, especially driven by increased adoption of digital wallets as a result, and in addition to the pandemic. So digital wallets have historically and predominantly been used namely for payments, but we see those use cases growing exponentially and becoming a lot more sophisticated, both from a user experience, but also from a technology on the back end point of view. Now, you've also seen items around employee badge. In Apple Wallet, for example, the major players are getting more and more invested into that. You're also seeing things on the consumer side, like hotel keys in your digital wallet. Same thing around government documents, whether it's vaccine passports, driver's licenses, national IDs, et cetera, et cetera. And last but not least, also the big push of mobile ID adoption to enable mobile access and more into tenant experience apps from the commercial real estate vertical, which has been the highest and earliest adopter of this type of technology based on our survey results from a vertical perspective. Now let's hop into the last topic and the findings, and then I will turn things over to the panel. Last but definitely not least is this idea that biometrics are reaching an impressive momentum, and we expect to see this continue moving into 2023, but frankly, really picking up steam beyond that, and we'll cover that here in just a second. All of you know what we're talking about here, but various types of biometric authentication, fingerprint scanning. Now, granted, we also talked about contactless and touchless technologies earlier, though, so you'll be seeing more and more investment and interest in facial recognition, voice recognition, and retinal scans. And of course, the reason for this adoption is not just because it's cool, cool being a scientific term, but because of the idea that there are a lot of benefits to it, right? So going into a passwordless model, enhancing security, restricting access, minimizing human error, and of course, plugging back into topic number 3, mobile enabled and cloud-based, so it can be managed across a variety of locations and a variety of stakeholders. So let's go into the final slide of the findings. That's going to be a continuation of this biometrics. Now, the one piece of information I really want to point out here is if you take a look at the pie chart, you'll kind of see where people are on their journey to biometrics implementation or not. So whereas 59% of our respondents are either currently using or plan to introduce biometrics in the next year to 5 years, we were interested to see that 41% do not plan to introduce biometrics. And we did see when we did a cross-section of the data that those were mostly within smaller organizations, again, those that had less than 1,000 people. We have some expert insights on that as well here to come. So final slide from my piece, and I will turn it over to the experts. Why did we do this? In a nutshell, we really just wanted to, again, as an industry leader, find a way to find out and discover and share out with our stakeholders, our end user, customers, and of course, those of you on the media side, what's driving the industry and why is that important, so that we can adapt to this ever-evolving, extremely rapidly evolving security landscape, capitalize on new technologies, adjust, and make sure that we are getting everyone on board to deliver exceptional digital and physical security experiences, again, as those lines continue to blur.